welcome everybody. Thank you for coming along to join us today to talk about another summer without family. It's great to see those of you who are here in New Zealand, and I know that there are a number of other people who are waiting to receive the recording. But what we're also really excited about is the potential for your family and friends and others offshore to be able to see this conversation today. And we really hope that you will share it with your family and friends offshore for three reasons, really. One is that perspective is really important when you are separated from your family. Everybody needs to understand each other's perspective and where they're coming from beyond the words that might be said, because everybody's seeing it from a different point of view. And I think by having your family see the conversation between a group of people who are stuck in New Zealand might help them gain some insights into your situation. It also is a great way, this recording is going to be a great way of opening channels of communication for you with your family, because I'm sure there are going to be things that come up that you may not have thought of, that your family may not have thought of, that are going to be windows into how each other's seeing the situation, and also windows into a better way forward for relating with your family offshore. And thirdly, I think we've talked about this quite a lot in our sessions, which I know a number of you have attended before, that you're not alone in this situation in New Zealand of being an expat who's separated from your family. But I don't know whether your family's offshore necessarily realise that too. I guess it might be quite isolating for some of them if they're not able to talk about how difficult it is with other friends who have their family with them at the moment. So when I say we're not alone, you're not alone in New Zealand, and your family offshore are not alone. There are other grandparents and parents offshore who are facing the same thing that they are. So that's just a bit of framing to start us with, and welcome to Carolyn, who's just joined the call. I'd also like to welcome Helen Ellis, who's up there on the corner of the screen, the corner of my screen. Helen has kindly joined us today to provide the expert input that we need. She's a distance family expert. She finished her Master of Arts, her MA on distance families, which was quite an original project in New Zealand. There's no one looking at this area apart from Helen from a New Zealand perspective. So she's written a book based on her research, which is the first of a series of three. Her first book, which I'm going to hold up now, hopefully it's going to see, the first book is Being a Distance Grandparent, which you can also see in the background behind Helen there. But she's also going to be writing books about being a distant parent and being a distant child as well. So the messages wend between the three books. She's also been just announced as a finalist in the Employee Mobility Institute Awards for her work, which is quite groundbreaking and amazing recognition for the work she's doing in Australasia. And her thesis was a runner-up in the EAC Thesis Award. So yes, clap, clap from Jonathan there. Well done, Helen. And it's not just Helen's academic experience that we're gaining today, it's also her personal experience. 3 of her 4 children live overseas, 5 of her 6 grandchildren live overseas, and they're all in the US, England, and Scotland. So she is, in fact, living what you're living. She's a distance family on a daily basis and has been for many years. So welcome, Helen, and thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Bridget. It's always great to work together.
It is indeed. Now, I'm just going to start off quickly before we launch into a bit of a conversation with Helen. We thought we might frame the discussion today around 2 points. One of the things that we've found most valuable for expats generally during COVID is making a distinction between what you can control and what you can't control, and focusing on what you can control and trying to leave to one side what you can't control. So we're going to use that lens for our conversation today. I'm just going to share a screen quickly with you, which we will come back to later on. So what we thought we'd do is start off by making a list here, which I have done, what we can't control about another summer without family. We can't control the borders closed. Much as we'd all like to, have a say in what the government's doing, that is what it is. We can't control that we're not physically able to be with our family offshore. That's just a fact. We can't control that there's no clear time frame or date for when we'll be able to see family again. This is sounding like a bit of a depressing list, but I thought I'll put all the depressing things on one side and then we can move on to the positive stuff with Helen. And unfortunately, I know that many of you have family overseas in countries where the COVID situation is a lot more serious than it is in New Zealand. So we can't control that, and we can't control how it's affecting your family, both mentally and physically. You can't be there to help your family on a daily basis anymore. That's impossible. And one of the most annoying things about New Zealand is that our time zones are the most inconvenient in the world. This is one of Helen's key points. I mean, that we can't control that, but it is what it is. And then this is another point which actually came up in one of the questions or challenges that one of you had put forward prior to the call. We can't control that life has gone on over the past 2 years, and our family offshore has moved to new phases in their lives, for example, having children. And normally, we would all be quite involved in that, but we can't be. We can't control that that's happened, but what can we do to work with it? So there's probably more things that you could add to that list, but that was just a few to start with. So what we're going to do at the end of the session is come back and with you put together a list of what we can control or do about another summer with family. And Helen's answers and what she's going to share with you is going to help us spark some things that we can do. So that's going to be a bit of a takeaway for you to both discuss with your families offshore and also utilize to kind of get out of that, too much worrying about what we can't control. So I'm just going to stop sharing now and start talking to Helen. So we have some questions here I'm just going to run through with Helen in a very conversational way. Helen has looked through all of the pre-questions that you've submitted, and we're going to weave them in. If there's anything that you particularly want us to cover or you think we've missed, just jump in. It's a very informal session here with a small group. So feel free to jump in if you want to. So Helen, Christmas is upon us now. Can you share us what it's like for you? What's your personal situation, and what was your vision of what Christmas you thought might be like for you and your family?
Well, I guess this Christmas we knew that, we would definitely not have any overseas family here. But the Christmas before, we already had family booked to come down, and of course that never happened. So Christmas this year is the same routine of all these calls at different times and the different time zones and all that sort of thing. And we've just bought a lovely new outdoor table. I'm sort of thinking, it'd be really nice if somebody could be sitting at that. We do have a small number of family members here, and I put my hand up. I'll host this year. Keeps me busy, keeps my mind diverted, and we'll get to use our new table with some of them. But I can tell you that, and you'll get me going now, we've got some pretty hurting family overseas, because it's been, they're all busting to come home. And, it could be quite hard for a little bit, but they do know that they can, and they do know that they will in 2022. And we're quite clear about that. And they're busting to come and have a visit. And we won't have to get in a plane and go anywhere, because they're all busting to come and have a visit. So Christmas this year is just like another one. We've had plenty by ourselves, and I've been doing this for 30 years. My stepson is, we've been away for over 30 years. So we're pretty used to having lots of Christmases by ourselves, or just with our limited family. So that's not unusual for us. But we just live in hope about 2022. That's the goal now.
Keeping your eye on the future. Yeah, I'm interested, always interested in you, Helen, because you're very kind of measured and philosophical, and put your emotions to one side. But I imagine, and I've heard from other people I've spoken to, that now that we're at this almost 2 year point with people not being able to see their family, that some family members offshore, that kind of resentment starting to bubble up a bit, and people are hearing messages from family offshore saying, I never wanted you to go anyway, and look what's happened, and you've kept me from my grandchildren, and I knew this was a bad idea. And how do you cope when it gets kind of really quite distressing like that?
Well, I think it is their choice to talk like that. And that's something that I explain to them when I write my book, for example, and the grandparent book is, it's not very helpful. And I'm nicely telling them that. They raised you, and they said, go for it, take on the world, you can do anything. And that's exactly what you've done. It just happens that you've ended up in another country. And there is a part of them that's really, really proud of what you're doing. They probably don't tell you that often enough. but it's their choice to talk in with that sort of language. So I encourage them to think about the language that they use, because it's not your job to solve their worrying. That's not your job, you know. Their job is to emotionally, with resilience, deal with their own situation and accept that they have raised children who've decided to go and see the world and give wonderful experiences to their grandchildren and all that sort of thing. And so I'm fairly firm about that. So I even explain to them about the way that they talk. I call it the 3 H's. And I say to them, there's 3 levels of the way that they can talk to you. And one of them is what I call H for harmful. And they're saying things like, how dare you go and travel overseas and take our grandchildren, and look now, as you say, you're in this other country for Christmas. It's very harmful. It's not very helpful at all. So then the next level is what I call H for human. And they say things like, I miss you so much. You know, I really feel the distance. I just want you home. That's a very human way of talking. But I tell them, talk to your friends about it. That's not your family. You know, it's okay to say that to your friends, but not your family, because it's not really very helpful. So then the 3rd level is H for helpful. And that's when they say, this is your decision, and I respect your choices, and I'm proud of you, and I'll keep supporting you from afar. And that takes a belly full of love and courage and empathy. And it's not easy in the moment. So, you know, our jobs as parents, whether it's, you know, one day your kids will fly the nest and end up on the other side of the world for a Christmas, and you'll have to go through the same thing. And then they may have a grandchild that you can't pick up and hug at the same time. So I think that we all have a responsibility here. And I do explain to the grandparents that that's really important, how they talk. And I just think that's our job. Our job as parents, grandparents, is to be helpful in that area. Mm-hmm. So when they're talking like that at the moment, it's because it's coming from the heart, and it's not easy to hear. But I just think we have to realize that that's where the space that they're in, and it's not your job to solve it.
Yeah, again, you know, anything that watching this, or, you know, looking at with 3 H's, Helen, to help them understand the impact it's having, and also where they're coming from too, because I guess it almost comes down to that, what you can and can't control again, because at the end of the day, they can't control that's happened now. But it's how do we keep the relationship going, because no family wants to be on bad terms when they're across the other side of the world. Nobody wants that.
No. And when there's that talk, that emotional deep talk, you can't be creative then. You know, you can't think about all the different ways you could connect and all the things you could flip on its head and do differently when you're just immersed in all that stuff. So it really pays to try and get your head out of that space if you possibly can.
Yeah, and I should add here too that we're going to send out a PDF of the 3 H's with the follow-up email. So that might be something even to chat with your family and friends about. So yeah, we got into deep stuff quite quickly there, Helen, but I mean, that's just the nature of the conversation, isn't it?
Yep,
so let's move to something a little bit more positive. Yeah. So if we can't hug each other this Christmas in terms of family offshore, what can you suggest to people on the call, and also those who are watching the recording, in terms of gems of wisdom for what we can do to refresh our modes of communication and just, you know, build that positive relationship?
Yeah. When we, Bridget and I were chatting yesterday, I just described it as throwing a whole lot of mud at the wall. You know, this is just throw a whole lot of mud. And some of these ideas you go, oh no, that's not our family, that's not us. But there might be you know, if you go away with 1 gem or just 2 gems that you can tweak, that's great. So first of all, if you're getting a Christmas tree and you're putting it up, think about where it's going to go in your house, that maybe it can create like a backdrop. You know, you imagine those scenes with the amazing fireplace and the stockings hanging off them, you know, like, can we do a Kiwi version of that? Can you think about, I mean, right now, I think, you know, we've got quite creative with Zoom. I'm in my bedroom right now. I never Zoom from here before, but there's phones and there's rubbish trucks today and everything. So I'm hiding myself away. So we've got really creative about doing it in a different way. Please make sure you open your presents in front of each other. If you've been sent presents, don't open them when those people who've sent them aren't on the call. You've thought so much about the presents, they've thought so much about the presents. If you can just share that moment, and if it means you've got to tell the teenage kids, just smile if you don't even like it, whatever. We've all done that. Just make sure you do, because it's really disappointing when you find someone's already opened it. Flip things on the head at home. If you've always done the turkey at 2:00 in the afternoon, have a barbecue at 11 or something. Just totally flip what you do, your routine. Now we've got a bit of time on our sides between now and Christmas. We don't have all those social events here in New Zealand that we're used to, the school things. There's just so few less. So you've got that kind of family time. What about going off to Bunnings or Mitre 10 and spending some money on a whole lot of cheap and ghastly lights and stringing them all up and creating something for your neighborhood that maybe you've never done before? Maybe it's not even your thing, but it would get people talking, and they would get them stopping at your letterbox, and maybe you'll get to chat to some neighbors that you haven't met and meet someone else new in the neighborhood. And and even put an Instagram handle out there and some of the decorations. Maybe it might mean that you get to connect with somebody. Really laugh at all ridiculous stories. I want to share one with you. Can share. Our neighbours have got a daughter. She's been her and her family living in Sweden. There's lots of toing and froing. They finally come home. There was a 2-year-old amongst it. This kid's been everywhere, airports, you name it, all the problems. She's got a little dolly. She puts a cotton bud up the nose of the dolly and goes, twinkle, twinkle, it doesn't hurt. And this is a COVID test she's seen over and over again. I just think that's a great story. That would have never happened if it wasn't for, the last year or so. Presents, take the hard work out of it, make it easy, easy for your parents or grandparents to send things, give them suggestions. I'm sure they're open to it, the vouchers, all that kind of thing. Ask for advice at home about what would be useful to send your folks. It's hard enough to get stuff anywhere, and let's try and do the best job we can. Arrange for some flowers to arrive a few days before Christmas, because the prices will be cheaper a few days before, but just far enough that they'll still look nice for Christmas Day, and so that they're just there. It's just something you'd never done before. We sent flowers for the first time to our daughter yesterday because something really ghastly's happened in her life. And she, of course, burst into tears when they arrived. But I've never done it before. I thought, that's a lot of money, Anyway, it was worth it because we can't get in a plane. So to me, $75 for some flowers is cheap compared to an airfare. Think about traditional foods that maybe you could get a hold of your mother or mother-in-law, find something that was always part of your life at home, and maybe have a little baking session with the kids if it's possible with the time zones, or make a promise that you'll serve something on Christmas Day that she would serve if you were home, that kind of thing. Just, here she is, take a picture of the dish on the table, you're here, you've arrived. Vacations and holidays this year, I once again turn it on its head. If you've never gone camping, go camping. If you've never been on a farm, go on a farm holiday. Do something you'd never normally do. And just a suggestion also, I've had a year I've learned about disabledness and being infirm. My husband's had a knee replacement. It's kind of gone on for absolutely ages. And my mum's not so well now. She does live here and not as able. So I've really learned to appreciate what it's like to have to go to the supermarket when you can't actually walk around the whole thing, those sorts of situations. So just think about, if your parents or family members were coming, each year they would come and see you. They're not quite as able as they were the last year before. So anything you do this year, wherever you go on holiday, make it the most energetic with the most number of stairs or climbing or, a tramp or something like that. Tick that one off this year, because you might not be able to do it if they come next summer. They might say, oh, my knee's not so good now, or
Actually, I quite like that, Helen, because, it's not ironic because it's human nature, but, often, and I've been in the situation myself when I lived offshore, you feel like your holidays are dominated by doing what your family wants to do because you've either gone home or they've come here. Whereas in fact, the one blessing of people not being able to travel is you do get to choose your own Christmas holiday, and you can do exactly what you want.
Yeah.
1 year.
Take advantage of it. There won't be many opportunities like this. And then, of course, share your holiday plans with your folks, give them links to the attractions you're doing each day so they can visualize what you're doing. Whatever. So, there may be a tradition I'm just thinking about, maybe there is a prayer, a grace for your meal that you've always said in your family. Can you dig it out? Can your folks send it? Can you say it will be said this Christmas Day? Ask everybody how the day could be more memorable. Sit your kids down at dinner tonight and say, right, I want one thing out of you that we've never done before. What would mean something to you? How can we do it? To ask a bunch of questions. Another thing is the gift voucher from children. This is a little bit of creative stuff, and you'll know if your kids can do this. One of the things I talk about is alone time, the greatest gift. We can have all these big video calls with everybody there and lots of noise and mayhem, but relationships are enhanced and built in the alone times, the one-on-one conversations. If your children or yourself, would consider saying, creating a gift voucher that goes to the parents or an auntie or cousin or anybody, this voucher entitles you to one call once a month, one-on-one, you and me, and I'll set it up. I'll get it all organized in the system. So what you're saying to your grandchildren is that they can take some of the responsibility, not your children, sorry, that they can take some of the responsibility to connect with your family back home, and ask them, would you be prepared to do that? I can tell you that if your parents were told that they were being given a one-on-one call in private with each grandchild once a month, that would be all their Christmases at once. They don't need anything else. Zip. Underline. That is so precious to them. Now the kids might not be excited about it, and maybe they'll need a little bit of coaching, and maybe they'll need ideas of things to talk about, but it's precious time. And I compare it to, I do have two granddaughters here. They're 19 and 22. I've been the step grandmother all their life, and I've spent a lot of time with them in the car, picking up, dropping off, all that kind of thing. And you have great conversations in the car. You're not even looking at each other, it's sideways. We talk about things that the rest of their family don't often talk about, really. And that's what your parents or grandparents could be gaining if you were able to set that up. So it's just a suggestion, a homemade gift voucher sent to them. So that's a whole bunch of ideas I've just sort of thought of. I don't know if any of those are useful.
Thanks, Helen. And I'd just also like to add on there too, because a couple of people mentioned in the pre-questions, small children not being prepared to speak on video, and also teenagers too. And Helen and I were just chatting about this beforehand, and just riffing off your idea of the voucher or whatever. For little kids, all it takes sometimes is for them to sort of run into the room, hold up a picture they've done at school if they're too shy to speak, or something they've made, show the grandparents, and then leave again. Because they'll change their mind. As they get older, they'll want to chatter, or they might even get sort of tricked into chattering by that. But, don't put the pressure on them having to sit there for a whole call. And for the teenagers, if they want to make a TikTok video and send it to their grandparents, or online, that's another good idea, Caroline, online video games with teenage kids, or ask them to do a little video showing something interesting that they've been doing. They don't want to chat with their grandparents, but they might be persuaded to do a little video they can record and send to their grandparents to watch later. So instead of having expectations about what everybody should do, perhaps again just think around the creativity about what is possible and what might fit in, and perhaps even asking particularly the teenagers what they're prepared to do.
Give them a chance to have thoughts around that, and they may have things that are totally left field that we never thought of. I mean, even if they must have done so many video presentations for schoolwork. I mean, can any of that be shared? The project about whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
My parents are really happy to sit through that.
That's right. They're because in real life they'd be dragged along to the ballet concerts and all the rest of it. So it's really no different.
And they're not excited about it. And that's absolutely true. They are dragged along to things. I've gone to every single prize giving, and all the time my stepdaughter here says, "Oh, Helen, do you really want to come to the prize giving? They take hours, especially once you get to high school." I said, "No, I'm there." So it doesn't, every encounter does not have to be magically fabulous. No, it's okay.
Yeah, mixing up and creativity, I think, are the two sort of key points I've got from what you said, Helen. So onto another plane. We've learned a lot about COVID, and none of us are going to take for granted our ability to physically connect. Is that a plus going forward? How do you see that us fitting back into a life where we can both be virtual somehow and also physically connected with our family? How do you think that looks as an opportunity?
I don't think any of us will ever think about jet lag, getting on a plane, complaining about anything about flying. I mean, all we want to do is do it. We will never, ever forget this experience. We've had wartime type experiences. I don't know if it's helpful, but I frame this whole COVID thing, I call it a war. It's a world war. And this is how I frame it, and that's how I cope, because then me and my troubles seem like a little drop in the ocean, because it's this big, humongous war. And my dad was born in London, and he was a lad young boy during World War II. And, he had, they had their house was bombed, and, they were going to the underground in the middle of the night. He missed months and months of school, and he turned out perfectly fine. So when I think of how families have been dispersed in situations like that, then that's how I kind of bring it in perspective for myself. And this time last year, 3 years ago, we were just getting home from a trip where these photos are actually, and 4 weeks, so that was in Portugal, and then 4 weeks later we had to get on a plane to go to the States for Christmas, and I'm like, oh, I am so over this flying. I want to go, but and we even upgraded to premium economy, which we haven't normally done a lot of, just to get on the plane. I will never feel like that again. Stick me right at the back and I'm fine. I think it's put a lot of things in perspective. Jet lag. My kids are talking totally differently to me. Yesterday, my daughter said, "I have lost all connection with New Zealand." She hasn't been back for 5 years. That was pretty hard. And she's so aware of it, even talking about returning and retiring here in years to come. And whoa, I wasn't expecting that. So COVID has changed all of us and our expectations and so I think we've gained lots of exciting things out of it. And Zoom alone is just open doors. It's opened doors of how competent our family has become with technology, or many of them have really stepped up the game. So I think our expectations of each other are a lot more kind of realistic when we connect now. We're just so grateful. I'm just so grateful when we eventually connect. I won't moan about anything.
That's right. Yeah, and just drawing us back also, I think a lot of people too are worried about the impact that these long separations are having on people. Grandparents not seeing their grandchildren. Some of them haven't seen grandchildren who've been born, for example, or missing a long time in a child's life, or conversely missing in an older person's life. Every year is precious, and you're not able to see the older members of your family. From your experience, or from what you research, how has this affected relationships, having this long-term separation?
I can tell you that you just pick up from exactly where you left off. Because we've been doing it so long, I have grandchildren in England who are 19 and 22. And we've been going since they were babies. And sometimes there would be, a 2-year gap, because I had teenagers at home at that stage, because my stepkids are much older than my own kids. Ours is a blended family. So I had teenagers at home and grandchildren coming on the other side of the world. And so, we would go every couple of years, but we'd just pick it up. It's like any good friend, you just pick up where it was. And, yeah, the kids, and I always think to myself, if I walked out the arrival halls, would my 5 and 7-year-old who are living grandchildren in Atlanta recognize me in a lineup? I think they would. So because of all those little Facebook things and video calls and all the things we do in between, honestly, within 24 hours, you'll feel like you haven't left. It hasn't been that long. It will be fine. You'll all fit in. You don't lose anything. You just pick it up from there. I do have to I give kudos to the ones who've delivered babies during this, and especially if there's any grandparents who are watching, if you're a first-time grandparent and your first grandchild arrived during COVID and you haven't been able to hug that child, it doesn't get any harder. So, but you will have your moment. The only good thing is babies never remember this time. So the child is not affected, only you. You have missed out on that physicality of those hugs and the smell and all that. I do, it's been a really hard gig for both sides. But honestly, if they are that little, they don't remember a thing. And it's only from about 18 months old that kind of start to get a grip of it. And it's only if they can't start, as long as they see lots of photos of everything. I send photos, little photo books all the time. So to answer your question, it won't matter. It won't matter that it's been 2 or 3 years. My daughter hasn't been home for 5. We had great years of gaps between some of the visits. Well, not yet great, but you just pick up. So don't worry about it.
Yeah, we're kind of in the pit of it at the moment, aren't we? And particularly with we come back to that, what we can control, what we can't control. For us, we don't know when it's going to be. Whereas in the past, you could have said, okay, well, I'm probably not going to be coming home for 2 years, but in XYZ, I will be back. Whereas now we just don't know when that's going to be.
I think 2022. My kids are all coming home in 2022. We could quite likely get on a plane. It's a mess that we don't get to have the benefit of the summer holiday, that people can come in for a longer time, or we can use that longer time. That's a real nuisance. It might be that you have to think outside the square and go, okay, we've just got the school holidays, and work's tricky. So one parent takes one child in the July school holidays, and one parent takes one child in the October school holidays, or something like that.
Yeah.
Thinking outside the square of how you can make it happen. But we are going to connect in 2022. There'll be a riot. And I've never protested in my life. I'll be there.
Distance Grandparents for Borders opening, Helen. It'll be a new movement. Great. Okay, well, now, does anybody want to jump in with any questions before we just quickly go back to that, the share screen, and just run through that to round things up? Or any points we haven't covered that you had in your pre-questions?
Yeah, just something from my side is the having to count under my breath and breathe when people don't take COVID seriously here in terms of getting vaccinated or doing their bit, because having personally lost family to COVID, it makes it, I think we're in a really fortunate position here, and I don't think a lot of people realize here how fortunate they are. And I think us having family overseas makes the reality of what COVID is a lot more real, and inspires me to do as much as what I can in terms of what can I control, is to do everything I can to make sure we keep everyone safe here. But yeah, just taking that deep breath when someone's obviously coming from a point of view where it's theoretical, not real.
Yeah.
Well, I'd have to say that your family is coping with the same thing. It doesn't matter. I mean, we've got one of the highest rates in the world, and my kids all live in places where the percentage isn't as good as it is in New Zealand. So we're not alone with that mentality. And we've seen so many situations where families and friends have been divided. I was in America when Trump got voted in. I was actually in Chicago and got, next day there were big protests, and I ended up in the middle of it. And so, you see these divisions, and I guess just make a decision that that's not a division that's going to be part of your family, and because it's brutal, it's so destructive. I know it's not helpful. I think the New Zealand initiatives, it's going to force people to have to take it, have it just to get their haircut or just to go to a concert. And, I feel for them. I've got family members who have made a decision, to not to do it, and they've got their reasons. And some of them are ones that, I'm invited for Christmas Day, but, the word came out, Helen, what is your thought about this? We want to know how you feel about it. And I said, you are welcome at my home. I would never not have the few family we've got here not come. But I sympathize with you. We all just are in our own space. We just think about how it is for us, and we live in our space. I mean, the world's been laughing at New Zealand lately for how cautious we are. But we think it's okay when we're here, So I guess making a decision that it's not going to be a harmful subject in your family, because that's just, don't go down that track. It's just not worth it, Yeah, but I do understand.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm just going to share the screen again. I'm not sure whether you were here, Carolyn, when we were talking about this before, but we kind of have an overriding theme for the session today, which is what you can control and what you can't control. And we listed out what we can't control, and Helen's given us a few tips for what we can control. So I am happy if you want to speak up, or otherwise Helen can dictate to me, figure out how to do that, what we can fill in on this side.
Well, was there anything on my list, guys, Jonathan, Karen and Caroline, that you said, oh, that's a gem, I can use that? Was there anything that...
For me, a lot of the stuff you said would be helpful. It really has. I mean, I don't want to even name them, because a lot of them were brilliant ideas, and especially like the gift voucher from the kids for a call once a month.
Yeah. Right.
I liked the idea of, setting times to open presents together. My daughter and son and my granddaughter are overseas as well. So there's a bit of a time difference, but, like you say, flipping the times so that normally you would open presents in the morning here, but if we delay that 5 hours and do that when the people in Australia are awake, then I really like that idea as well.
The great thing about that is that you may be actually setting a new, routine or tradition within your family, that's how you do from now on. And that'd be fantastic, because I've had years of being disappointed and not seeing something open. And now we're hoping we're going to change that. So that'll be positive. That'd be great.
One of the things I put on my list is the connection back to my mom and my sister's pretty ropey, so see if I can investigate getting broadband installed there so that they can get proper
It'll be a lovely Christmas
connection.
present.
Yeah, we're kind of reliant on cell phones, and that's always a bit dicky. So if I can get something more permanent set up, it'd be a lot easier to connect with them.
Yeah, and I mean, and in a way, that's kind of like you can launch it for Christmas, so then it makes it such a special Christmas for your family, doesn't it?
Correct.
Have that connection.
Yeah, and not have to worry about how much the data on the cell phone is costing, because I've paid for that. So yeah, that's something I think I'm going to look at doing.
And if you have some, teenager who can give them a few lessons and go back and explain the same thing 6 times.
That's a great idea, actually. Get the teens to teach the grandparents. They can't tell I'm not doing a call with them, but just say, I'll just tell them what to do.
Yep.
One suggestion that Helen and I were talking about before the call actually was getting the whole family together, both the ones offshore and locally, to sort of collaborate to design a Christmas that, you know, it's not going to be like any Christmas you've ever had before. It's not like sitting down together around a table in South Africa or New Zealand, but, you know, how can you create something that's really memorable? So you're creating a shared memory of Christmas 2021, which will be unlike any other and hopefully won't need to be repeated, but it will be a shared thing.
Absolutely. And about your holiday destination choice this year, make it the most energetic with the most number of stairs, climbing, things that older people can't manage. Just especially if it's something that you may never have actually done, you know, whether it's, you know, do the Abel Tasman National Park walk, or, you know, something that's, wow, you know, it's fantastic. Look back on it and go, well, if it wasn't for COVID, we wouldn't have done this. Yeah. Especially something that mentally takes you right out of home and laptops and work, and, you know, as you know, if you're lying on the beach, maybe you've got too much time to think. You need to be busy, exhausted, climbing up a hill and trampling somewhere. I don't know. You know how your brain works.
Yeah.
And share that itinerary with your family. Hear what you're doing day to day.
According to Zoom, you can actually download this document. I've just wanted, if you can see at the top in the bar, can you see where it says save? I'm pointing to it on my screen. Do you have that on your screen? I'm going to save it, and okay, well, I'll save it after and send it out with the follow-up email as well, because, you know, I think even just having this diagram and talking to your family about it, you might come up with some more things in the right-hand column. You know, as time goes on, you'll have different things that you want to do. Great. Okay, well, I think we've just about reached the end of our session. We should let you go off and have a little bit of lunchtime that remains, unless anybody has any other comments or questions that they wish to ask Helen. We might just wrap up. And again, Karen, I'm not sure if you heard at the beginning, we're going to send out the recording in a follow-up email along with some other material from Helen. And we, you know, most welcome to share it with the rest of your organisation. It will be on our social media channels and things as well too. And of course, you know, as individuals, share it with your family offshore.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you very much
for coming. And yes, thank you to everybody who's going to be watching the recording. We had quite a few people who've registered who haven't been able to make it today. So yeah, thank you for those of you who have come along and shared your thoughts and ideas and experiences with us. And of course, thank you to Helen for, again, making a contribution to, you know, the situation we find ourselves in at the moment. I think it's very timely that your book was published, and it's timely that we have you here in New Zealand to help us through it.
Thank you. Yes, no, it's been really great. I just thought I'd mention that reading the book is really helpful for each generation to understand how it is for the other. So this is my project with the 3 books: understanding your being a distance grandparent, being a distant son or daughter, that's you guys, being a distance grandchild. It's become a bit of a labor of love. It's become the next season of my life, and because there's really nobody out there kind of explaining how it is. So I just thought I'd mention that you might like to give a copy of the book to your parents, the grandparent book, because that's the one that's out at the moment. And for the South Africans, it is available on Loot, and is it Take Me or something? Anyway, it's on my website. But there's a way to give it. And I've come to the realization that it's a really good idea if you read the book yourself, because then you come from it, you understand how it is from their point of view, and you understand what I'm saying. And then you give the book to your parents, because then you can say, I've read this book, you know, I really have a really good understanding of how it is for you, and, you know, I'd like to give it to you. That's a real act of love, because as they're reading it, they know that you've read it, and it's quite powerful. That it's sort of what I call the out-of-town expert with the briefcase theory. There's someone else telling you one thing and the same thing to them. So my message is, I really encourage you to, get hold of my books along the way, because everything we're talking about is the sort of thing that's in it. But there's a way to handle it. So I suggest you read it yourself so you feel happy about it. And then, send them a copy and with your love. And when that's happened within families, it's been very, very powerful, because it's creating empathy. And that's what I want to do. I want to create empathy within the generations. So that's why the subtitle of all the books is A Book for All Generations. Anyway, I'll put that in. I don't want you to think I hate sort of pushing anything like this, but I just know that it's made a big difference. So I just want to help and just assure you that it's a labor of love, and I'm just here to help families, and I know that they have. So yeah, put that in what it's worth. So next year, around about April maybe, will be the Being a Distant Son or Daughter. That's you guys, which has been there's like 70,000 words in a Word document right now, which I've got to get down. There's so much to write. There's so much to talk about how it is for you. And I'm really blunt, and this is how it is, explaining it so that your family understands as well. And then coming up with ideas of how to reframe the thinking and what's helpful and what's not. So yeah, and then we'll do the grandchildren the year after that. So anyway, thank you for listening to me about that, but you'll find that at distancewithacfamilies.com. Thanks, Brit.
Lovely. Okay, well, thank you. And everybody enjoy the rest of your days. We hope to see you soon.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye.